Welcome back to Unapologetically Grown, the podcast where we have the conversations women over 40 have been waiting for. The ones that are real, unfiltered, sometimes hilarious, sometimes heartbreaking, but always honest. This episode is one that every woman will experience, yet somehow no one really prepares us for it. Menopause. One day you're fine, and the next you're standing in front of the refrigerator wondering why you're there. You're sweating through a meeting while everyone is asking if someone turned the air conditioning up. You can't remember a word you've said 1,000 times. Your sleep has packed its bags and left, and suddenly you're questioning whether you're losing your mind or just your estrogen. The truth? You're not crazy. You're not lazy. You're not just getting older. Your body is changing, and it's time we started talking about it without whispering. Joining me today is someone who has spent her career helping women navigate every stage of life. Dr. Eleanor Murray is a board-certified OB-GYN who graduated from the University of Alabama at Birmingham School of Medicine before completing her residency in obstetrics and gynecology. She went on to build a successful private practice in North Carolina, caring for women through pregnancies, life transitions, and menopause. In 2011, she returned home to the Huntsville area, where she has continued helping women take control of their health with compassion, experience, and a healthy dose of common sense. Today, we're cutting through the myths, the social media noise, and the outdated advice to have some real talk about menopause. We're talking hot flashes, hormones, mood swings, weight gain that seems to happen overnight, brain fog, intimacy, sleep or the complete lack thereof, and most importantly, what women can actually do to feel like themselves again. So grab your wine, where it's actually 5 o'clock today, or your beverage of choice, possibly an iced coffee if you're in the middle of a hot flash. Settle in and let's have a conversation every woman deserves to hear. Dr. Murray, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, ma'am.
When I mentioned to my friends that we were having this conversation, the response was overwhelming. Women said things like, please ask about the brain fog, or why didn't anyone warn me? Or can someone please explain why I'm up at 3 a.m. every day? Because I don't like it. So today, we're going to have the conversation that women are having in group texts, over wine, and even in the grocery store. So honestly, let's get started. You need your wine?
Yes, ma'am. Everybody needs wine.
So we hear these terms all the time. Perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause. What does that exactly mean?
So painfully, the definitions are more about what our physical body symptoms are doing. But there's a rainbow effect of the symptoms that cross over from perimenopause to years after the periods have stopped. However, the medical definitions for menopause is when we have ceased our period for 12 whole months. That's difficult if you have a reason you don't have a cycle, maybe a hysterectomy, etc. And then we use lab work to try and help us understand where you are. But the definitions are 12 months without a cycle is menopause. So after that happens, you are considered postmenopausal. The hard part is perimenopause. In general, it's about 2 to 3 years max prior to the period spacing. But sometimes that's a hindsight 2020, even though we're feeling these symptoms, and our periods might still be regular.
I know a lot of women feel dismissed when they go to the doctor, or maybe patronized or not taken seriously. Sometimes they're told just suck it up, or it's just aging, or it's all in your mind. But the reality is, from some of the surveys or sciences that I've read, is that women can spend up to a third of their life in some stage of menopause. Fortunately, most women don't, but some women can. I wanted to read a review on your website from one of your patients. It says, Dr. Murray listens to your symptoms despite your age of being too young for menopause. She cares, listens, understands that age and symptoms can differ for everyone. She does the appropriate labs, testing, etc. to get to the root of the problem without dismissing your concerns because you don't fit the textbook criteria of menopause. So that's a rave review from your clients. And it's a testimony to you. Do you think that part of that is gender related because you're a woman, the experience that you have, or is it actually just science and some of the reasons that you're dismissed maybe have something to do with a business model or some of the placebo effect studies that are out there.
Yes, I think that doesn't help us out. But first and foremost, symptoms are real. Whether it's perimenopause all the way, you're still having symptoms. So, and honestly, we're taught if you listen, you can usually make a diagnosis before you even touch the patient. And I think sadly that's skipped a lot. Mm-hmm. I think it comes in the realm of just, seeing too many patients and not having enough time for each one, In that, though, yes, I think there's a lot of dismissing, of women and patients. It definitely helps that I'm a female and went through menopause early. That's an extra bonus to being a little more empathetic, right? So been there, done that, helps. But you are correct. Sadly, and I say sadly, because I think it translated for a lot of physicians. But essentially in most of our hormone replacement or menopause studies, the placebo arms at the rate of 30 to 65% had improvement in their symptoms, okay? So you could read that and be like, well, how do I take them at face value when placebos fixed them, right? To me, that means that we are powerful. We've known we're powerful as women, I think, for a long time. And I do think that sometimes our mindset and other things that are going on with us can contribute and make symptoms worse or better. But you're still having these symptoms. That is what people need to be taken at face value for. And then working backwards to figure out if it's, appropriate for menopause treatment plans or it's a whole different direction, depending on what you hear when you listen to the patient.
So I know that you're very science-based. You base all of your results and diagnoses on the tests that you do. And I know that a big part, so there are 3 or 4 different things going on, but the biggest part is your estrogen and your progesterone and your levels. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the symptoms that result from that are things like anxiety, depression, brain fog, vaginal dryness, some of the other things that are just related to the estrogen and the progesterone. So can you talk about how that works, what's going on in your body, and maybe some of the triggers or some of the things that you can do to mitigate some of those symptoms despite your imbalance of estrogen and progesterone?
Absolutely. The challenge is that in the home stretch, there's a lot of ups and downs on both those hormones. The brain will never stop recruiting the ovary to give us estrogen and progesterone. So occasionally the ovary says, okay, fine, and we'll spit out a little bit more. So when you're trying to diagnose the patient and help them understand, it's still a moving target in the home stretch before the cycles completely stop. But estrogen is responsible for the plasticity of our vagina. I'll start with vaginal dryness. With the lack of estrogen, we will not stretch for insertion or deep penetration. Our vaginas are accordion-like organs, but without estrogen, they become stiff and they will rip and tear. So there's some skin-based estrogen effects. In the brain, when estrogen levels are fluctuating, but especially low, we lose some of the glucose activity in the brain. Every cell needs glucose to do its job. So we have some metabolic changes in glucose activity in the brain. We also have an increase in inflammation. Estrogen is actually a calming hormone for brain cells. Inflammation doesn't help any organ work, especially a brain. Okay. And then last but not least, estrogen helps us connect in our hippocampus for memory. So this comes back to the brain fog. So when it comes to anxiety, depression, estrogen helps serotonin, norepinephrine. Those are kind of happy hormones, if you will. And when we have fluctuating levels, the serotonin and norepinephrine are altered. So that is where Tuesday you feel great and Wednesday you feel, depressed and angry. So the fluctuations are really the hard part. And then we finally go through the whole transition. Estrogen levels remain low, inflammation persists, glucose isn't, used well, and, recruiting brain cells to connect and make memory, etc., is decreased. Progesterone is kind of a calming hormone. It works through the GABA system of the brain. And that is our internal stress reliever. So when we don't have progesterone, we have less of our own calming. And then the inflammation and the estrogen, changes increase how quickly we respond in a nervous way. So we're almost like being startled, like someone's, dropping something. in baseline life when estrogen is low. So we're hyper-reactive, hyper-responsive, irritable. And then without progesterone, we don't have any of our calming. So it's a perfect storm for mental health changes. We throw all the mental health changes into anxiety and depression because that's just a bucket that we can put it in. And I always say to patients, that means irritability. That means I don't feel like myself. It's anything where we are not responding or taking in our environment and responding the way we expect.
Okay, so you're talking about the hyperactivity of the brain. Can you expand on that just a little bit more?
So again, the estrogen progesterone phenomenon. But when it comes to brain fog specifically, we also don't recruit the hippocampus well. Estrogen helps us recruit hippocampus. That is our memory center. So that is why we don't remember things. Like we can remember 20 years ago, but 3 days ago is really hard because we're now not recruiting the pathways in our memory center as well without estrogen. So you are not crazy at all. You are dealing with a pitiful recruitment of hippocampus, which lays down those memories for us to have them in the future. Yesterday, today, 3 days ago to today. So we're not laying down as well. And we can go backwards in time and remember things 20 years ago, but the 3 days ago is always hard. And that is because of the recruitment challenge without estrogen.
Well, that makes sense.
So those combos between estrogen and progesterone lead to these moments, but they're also up and down so much that's why it's a wild ride, is the way I would describe it to patients.
Well, I noticed in my journey that relationships were a big part of it, whether it was work or a relationship or my foster kids or whatever. I mean, sometimes I just felt like ants were crawling on my back, and I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want anybody around. Just go.
Yes.
Leave me alone. I need, whatever it is that I need to do. So, that's a great explanation of why that was happening. Right. And so I know one time I went to the doctor and I'm just bawling and he's like, you need therapy,
No, you needed validation.
No. I said, he was a very young doctor. And I said, if you're going to take care of women my age, you're going to have to learn a few things.
Yep. And that is not what you say. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Go to a therapist.
No, therapy helps. But I mean, you're really the victim of your own changes of hormone levels. Yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
So there was a study by the Mayo, and I want to read some of these statistics because I find them very fascinating and somewhat damning again in the idea when we're talking about placebo effect or what have you. So the Mayo Clinic did a survey that said 13.4% of working women reported at least one adverse work outcome because of menopause symptoms, either reduced productivity, missed work, or a disciplinary issue. That's 13.4%. 10.8% miss work, a median of 3 workdays per year, which their research analysts determined costs U.S. companies $1.8 billion a year. And when you add in medical costs, $26 billion that menopause is causing in 2023, 2024 to U.S. companies. A 2023 workplace survey said 53% of women who had been unable to go to work at some point because of a menopause symptom. 67% said menopause negatively affected them at work. 27% said menopause had negatively affected their career progression. And 17% had considered leaving because they didn't have the workplace support that they needed. And 6.7% actually did leave the workforce because of menopause symptoms. So those are pretty eye-opening statistics. Other studies also address like relationships, not only in the workplace, but marriage. And that while there's no direct relationship to like divorce or anything like that, women report that this has a huge effect on, their life and their relationships and the way they feel. Like they may actually think they've fallen out of love with their spouse or whatever. So this is a lot of people. This is a lot of money. Do you think that it's increasing over time because of maybe people not dealing with things as well as, like Gen X boomers, they didn't complain, right? And so, we have that trajectory. But is this all a function of our hormone levels? Is there other reasons that we could get work? Do you have stories of like people that have had this and then they've come back and said, oh, my life is all better because I got whatever it was, the treatment, whatever your diagnosis was.
Yes. So, of course, we're always looking around and being like, is this job best for me? And when we're going through these wild rides, it makes you make kind of sometimes brash decisions, I would say. Mm-hmm. So absolutely. I am hoping by podcasts like this, more speaking of, these symptoms, that hopefully, we will get a better support system, maybe, right? Mm-hmm. But it is hard, I can imagine, as, a CEO and a man, who's very calm, cool, and collected, that we do, end up potentially being victimized by some of this, even though it's a natural progression for our body. So what I like to coach is, let's pause a second, let's go over the worst symptoms. Let's try and tackle those. Like if you're not sleeping well, because we haven't gotten necessarily to that part of the estrogen, progesterone stuff, but if you're not sleeping well, that is a torture technique. In the SEER school for military, they go through torture of not sleeping. And so when we're not sleeping well because of menopause, how do we expect our performance to be good? That is the day you're going to call out if you haven't closed your eyes. If you have a job like mine, you can't be off. You have to be on. And so calling out is probably the best thing you can do when the menopause symptoms are making your brain not work as well as it should.
So that is also part of something, the estrogen, progesterone. How is that?
From like an insomnia standpoint. Mm-hmm. So essentially, when we're sleeping, this whole lack of estrogen, I react, more emotionally, but I also am more sensitive to wake up noise. Rolling over normally doesn't trigger you to wake up, but with the lack of estrogen, your brain sometimes will say, oh, well, I need to react to that because we don't have the estrogen. We have extra inflammation, poor glucose, all the things. So you're a little more wakeful. And that's that 1 to 3 a.m. wake up like my alarm went off at 8:30 and it's time to start my day, right? Again, progesterone is the calmer. Without that, we don't have the calming. And so we're easier wake-ups, or we're having night sweats that leads to that decrease in our rest. Essentially, the big picture to me is we need more grace, But I also hope that we can come to a place where treatment options are a little more available to everyone. We get really good evidence based on the risk benefits of those, and we make women feel better sooner than making them wait it out and have, these statistics that you just read. Mm-hmm.
So I have a theory. I have this evolutionary theory that women age, and as we age, we have this awful aging process of wrinkles and crepey skin and vaginal dryness and all of that. And some of these other symptoms, because we're meant to biologically be less attractive to men because we no longer bear children. Where men, they age, but their sperm still works, so we're a little more forgiving and just biologically. I have no scientific proof of any of this.
I think you're dead on. I think you're very dead on.
I just think biologically it was designed so that women got ugly.
Yes.
Because so men wouldn't want them.
Amen.
And, of course, there's this whole business of fighting that. I'm in the anti-aging business, right? So what I want to know is, what is this? What is this? I woke up, when I hit menopause, I had 2.5 pack. I could see my Venus mound, okay, when I look down. Now there's this big golden dome here on my stomach that will not go away. Doesn't matter what I do. Doesn't matter how many GLPs I take or how much I work out or whatever. Why does every woman that I meet over 50 say, we all have the same dresses with the same... What is this?
It is the lack of estrogen and progesterone, which tell our bodies to give us the hourglass figure. Okay? So we do gynoid weight gain when we have estrogen and progesterone, which is breasts and hips. And it's less stomach. Now, of course, there's, body shapes and genetics. But when it comes to this menopause, everyone gets a belly, even though they never had one before. It is because the lack of estrogen makes us stop putting the fat in places that are more womanly. So we are all going to our abdomen. We kind of call that android fat because that's a male pattern. Believe it or not, as we lose estrogen and progesterone, our ovary will continually give us some testosterone, about the same rate of testosterone. Without estrogen and progesterone, that tells us to put it in our belly, like men gain in their bellies. It's very uncommon to see a gynoid gain in a man. That would be hips, right? They always have a belly in general. And now we take on that hormone situation because we don't have our estrogen and progesterone redirecting that. We also increase visceral fat. That's the most unhealthy fat. It is the fat beneath the fascia layer, which is the one that keeps us in. That's what herniates. When we have hernias, that's what we fix. The fat inside or below that layer is the most dangerous fat for our health. And the lack of estrogen makes us increase that. It's about a 5.4% increase per year.
Oh,
yes, ma'am.
5 years, that's 25, that's
yes,
almost 30%.
Ma'am. That is wrong, right? But that is why we all end up with somewhat of abdominal, girth. And sometimes we lose our bee honey and our breast tissue along the way because, again, we're getting that android body type.
I don't like it.
Yes. So strength training, you asked kind of what we can do about this. We also have a situation hormonally that is telling our body to lose muscle mass. Muscle mass and the amount we have correlates with how many calories we lose each day. This thigh muscle being large, each step I take is going to pay out for me at the end of the day with calorie use. So our body is also told to lose muscle. It's very, very uncommon to see an older lady with a giant bicep muscle or tone. And that is because it's called sarcopenia. We are losing muscle mass. And is that lack of estrogen. Sadly, we do throw this one in the aging situation because men have a little bit of that too. But to your point, they're still making their testosterone, which helps them with their muscle mass. So we're losing muscle, which is how we're using calories each day. And we're putting fat in our abdomens. And it is a perfect storm for weight gain.
Okay. Well, ladies, what you have to look forward to. So one of the other major symptoms is hot flashes. Can you tell us about hot flashes and why they happen? And
yes, ma'am.
And the triggers.
Absolutely. So the hypothalamus is the organ in our brain that tells us to shiver when we're freezing and to sweat in the desert. We're not in the desert, and it's deciding to sweat like we're in the desert. We get a very narrowing of where our body feels normal. So we get a little bit warm, and we spiral into 112 degrees desert response from our body because, again, that gland is telling us, telling our body what to do. But also shiver right after that, right? So we have a very narrow, what we call thermogenic window, if you will, from the hypothalamus. So we're always over or under, hitting that. With the lack of estrogen, again, the hypothalamus overreacts, so we get this profuse sweating instead of like a light, little glisten because of that overreaction. If we replace estrogen in the bloodstream, the hypothalamus gets more accurate. So then we're not in the desert anymore when I'm sitting here with you, right? I'm in the temperature-regulated area.
Can we talk about testosterone and some of those treatments and, pellets and how that's working out?
We can. Evidence-based wise, we don't have data on the amount of testosterone in general. Now, I don't do pellets, so there's an asterisk by what I think I know about them, okay? But when I get patients after pellets that have had some complications, these are the things I'm seeing. When we have too much testosterone, in fact, we're giving women almost a transgender level of testosterone in some of the pellet treatment plans. We don't have safety data on that, and our bodies shunt that to estrogen. So we have disease states in women who have high testosterone, and they don't come in telling me about their libido and their strength training that they're blowing out the water, right? They actually have hair growth and belly fat, right? We talked about this already. But if you go past that to almost male levels, you will get a lot of libido, okay? The challenge is, as that's shunted to estrogen, we see more complications, in my opinion, than benefits. So 55% of ladies on pellets versus 15% of ladies on my, gynecologic trained hormone replacement therapy will bleed because there is so much shunting to estrogen that thickens the lining of our uterus. We have no progesterone. They're giving some progesterone, but we have to match that, or over estrogenized uterus will get uterine cancer, in fact. All that shunting to estrogen can increase our risk of breast cancer. We used to give testosterone to men as a birth control method. We abandoned that because they had high cholesterol and some bad outcomes when we tried to give them an option for contraception.
So you said that was transgender levels. Is that making body changes?
Absolutely, yes. So when they come to me, sometimes our clitoris is growing into a small penis, and that's irreversible. So when we're overdone with testosterone, our body just responds to that in a male type way. Some women do see an increase in their muscle mass, but a lot of women find a big collection of weight in their abdomen. It's interesting, though, how women respond to testosterone. That is the crapshoot. Someone will say, oh, I didn't have any extra hair growth on my face. And then some women come in with a beard after these kind of treatments. So when it comes to testosterone, it definitely increases, our abdominal girth. Again, sometimes it can help people with some muscle mass improvement. But we don't have any kind of studies on the safety of over-supplementing that. In my hands, I'll do estrogen, progesterone, appropriately so, and then I will add physiologic testosterone. The problem with that is, in our studies on good libido, we had testosterone levels that were 0. So we didn't have a correlation on what I feel like most women are looking for, which is an increase in their desire, because that plummets also in menopause.
Biggest menopause myth?
Probably the testosterone stuff. And cortisol things. So the cortisol stuff, yes, cortisol is a big deal, right? But cortisol is secreted when we are looking at the surroundings we're in and feeling like we're running from a bear. Okay. We've just talked about how our brain needs estrogen and progesterone at steady states to function well, and we don't have that. So occasionally we are responding to the world around us as if we are running from a bear because of these imbalances of the other hormones. That is going to tell your body to secrete your stress hormone. I wish that everyone around us, myself included, could control my cortisol secretion, because that really is based on how I'm interpreting the world around me. We have to find some mental toughness, and we have to take things a little more in stride to help with the cortisol problem. It's not
and massages.
Yes, everything that will give you calmness and help you take in your life stressors will help with cortisol.
What's the most common question women ask? Most surprising symptom?
Frozen shoulder. Yep.
That's surprising.
Yes, ma'am. We can be going through menopause, and we have estrogen receptors in our joints, and that is why joint pain comes with. But frozen shoulder is definitely something that's unexpected and can definitely happen because our body's going through menopause.
Okay, last question. One thing women over 40 could do that would improve all of this?
Strength train. We were told to run and walk until our legs fell off as ladies, but really we need to be squat, lunging, planking, and doing more strength training. If we can get the most muscle in our body as we go through this transition, we won't struggle as much with some of these problems. Pretty much the most frustrating ones, such as a belly.
Okay. Dr. Murray, thank you for helping us normalize this conversation. I think so many women are going to finish this episode feeling seen, understood, and hopeful, and that's exactly why we started Unapologetically Grown. To everyone listening, remember this. Menopause is not the end of your story. It's simply another chapter, one that deserves knowledge, support, and a whole lot less shame. If this episode helped you share it with another woman in your life, chances are she's experiencing some of the same things and wondering if she's the only one. Until next time, keep growing, keep asking questions, and keep living unapologetically. This episode of Unapologetically Grown is sponsored by BV Medical Solutions. Wellness isn't a destination you arrive at once and check off your list. It's a journey, one that changes with every season of life. And at BV Medical Solutions, they believe you shouldn't have to navigate that journey alone. Located on Bob Wallace Avenue, BV Medical Solutions helps you feel your best from the inside out with personalized wellness solutions designed around your goals. Whether you're working towards weight loss, struggling with energy and brain fog, trying to optimize your health, or simply looking for ways to support your body as you age, their team is there to help you find the right path. BV Medical Solutions offers options including GLP-1 therapies and peptides to support weight loss goals, IV therapy for hydration and recovery, vitamin infusions, and advanced wellness options like NAD to support cellular health and energy. Because feeling better isn't about chasing perfection, it's about having the tools, support, and guidance to become the healthiest version of yourself. At BV Medical Solutions, wellness is a journey, and they're honored to be on that journey with you. Visit BV Medical Solutions on Bob Wallace Avenue or call 256-770-0565 and take the next step towards feeling your best.